This is episode 727 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drengmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Well, Wally, and our viewers specifically, you can tell that we are back together again here in studio.
Home sweet home, studio sweet studio.
Exactly. And lots to talk about. I will give a brief recap of some of the vacation related things that, stuff we did, just kind of broader information about that towards the end of our show. But as usual, there are plenty of news oriented stories to discuss. And we're going to start with one. It's actually based on a Illinois website called WirePoints. So kudos to them for digging into this U.S. Census Bureau data, which showed that Illinois suffered the nation's biggest percentage loss of population aged 18 and under between 2020 and 2024. Their decline was 6.1%. Unfortunately, New Mexico's decline was number two, ranked at 5.9%. So we saw, and I believe are continuing to see, a exodus of families and especially those with kids 18 and under. Other top losing states were New York, California, Oregon, Vermont, Hawaii. Pretty blue list right there, with the states seeing an influx of 18 and under young people. Shock of shocks. Florida, South Carolina, Texas, Idaho, Delaware, North Carolina, Tennessee, South Dakota. So right there, you're talking South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, and Florida, all of which lack a personal income tax. Kind of surprised in a sense that, if you don't follow economic policy, you wonder what the heck would the commonality be between states that lack an income tax and states that are keeping 18 and under, because those kids aren't paying much in the way of income tax, but their parents are, their families are, and those families are moving to states that are economically diversified, economically successful, and fast growing. And those states that lack an income tax are faster growing, and it's no surprise to me that they're seeing the influx, and New Mexico's in a demographic downward spiral, sadly.
Yeah, Paula, it's been a long time now, probably about 12 years. I heard Brian Sandroff talk about New Mexico's demographic situation at that time and the prognosis for the future. And at that point, it was not really very strong, even at that point, as we had an aging population and, the birth rate relative to what we need to sustain was relatively low. But that part of it, you inherit whatever demographics you have, but the key is do they get better, they get worse? That depends on the policies of the state, and that's the state writ large, whether it's countries, whether it's states like in the United States. And New Mexico has done many things that make it not an attractive place for young people to live. And so, again, not surprising, but it's one of those things that if you look at, it's one of those things you can eat. There's this criticism that comes from the progressives, like, oh, you do everything for business, and that uh, not taking care of the people. It's interesting. The thing that actually probably does the best for taking care of the people over the long term in the most ways is having a vibrant economy and a vibrant business situation, which for lots of reasons New Mexico does not. And now that we're in this situation, not growing, our young people leaving, it's going to get a lot better. It's going to stay the same, or it's going to get a lot worse. And that will happen based on the policies that are enacted. That's the good news. The bad news is, Paul, sometimes the policies take years multiple years, decades to be successful. And the political ruling class in New Mexico, if they do anything, they want to see results right away. Well, it's taken us a long time to get here, and even good policies may not work instantaneously when it comes to something as complicated and as hard to change as the demographics.
Yeah. So my primary thought when I see this is uh, this is covering the COVID-19 era. Of course, 2020 being when that really took off. We, of course, would hope as New Mexicans that this situation turns itself around. The COVID-19 response by Governor Lujan Grisham and other blue state governors that locked down harshly will be right up there with the public policy decisions that backfired and failed for the citizens in my lifetime. I
Yeah.
think that is safe to say, and hopefully this situation does even itself out. But you're right, Sanderoff and other demographers have been blowing the whistle, sounding the alarm on New Mexico's demographic challenges. And it's something that I do think is an opportunity because a lot of people out there, I'll just mention candidates, they want to talk about a lot of issues that are not as sexy, for lack of a better word. But, the economy of the state of New Mexico may not seem like a quote unquote sexy topic in an election campaign. But the idea that you can go to somebody's door and say, you have kids or grandkids, do you want them to make a life in New Mexico? Do you want them to be able or willing to stay in New Mexico, be somewhat close to you, and have a good job and form a family right here in your general region of the country? And this is something that we're seeing. We're seeing that young people in the state of New Mexico leave in droves for better opportunities, higher pay, less crime, better education system for their kids, etc. All of those things have pushed people out of the state of New Mexico, and yeah, we need to do better. Uh, we have plowed money into government programs after government programs, more into the K-12 system, free college, and numerous other, daycare, etc. I fundamentally do not believe that, and there's very few ways to poll this accurately, but I don't believe that most people are looking for those government handouts. I'm not saying they won't take advantage of them when presented, but when it comes to making a decision to relocate to another state, they are going to care much more about what job opportunities are available for themselves, for their spouse, what the school system looks like, what the crime situation is, and of course, cost of living as well. And we're a mixed bag in that regard. But, uh, you know, New Mexico's weather is unparalleled. Our geological beauty is also fantastic. But uh, until we change the policies, and I'll just throw it out there, 4 out of the 10 fastest growing states when it comes to uh, young people are to be found in the zero income tax group. That is a strong signifier that not taxing things like income, and New Mexico could easily do this, not taxing things like income can bring young people and their families to your state. But the question is, do the people of New Mexico want to keep their kids at home, and will they vote for candidates that will implement policies that show signs of success in keeping your kids at home? And that very much is open to question.
Yes, it is, Paul. And, there used to be kind of four that I always thought about, which were jobs, education, crime, taxes. And then in addition to that, just because it's gotten so bad in the last few years, I do think healthcare is up there. You know, if you're going to, if you're in New Mexico and you have aging parents and you see them unable to get into the doctor and you're thinking of starting a family and seeing that situation, I think that could be of concern as well. And the key is that these are not problems that need money. We have money. We just don't have policy. And so it'll be interesting to see if we make progress on any one of these, much less a combination.
Exactly. All right. Well, um, we'll move on here. Uh, Next topic is speaking of our elected officials, in this case, State Senator Harold Pope, who has announced he's running for lieutenant governor as a Democrat. I'm ashamed to say that Harold Pope is my state rep. Uh, he sadly has been in that seat now for over one term. He got reelected this past year in 2024. He wrote an article in the Albuquerque Journal, and it really caught my attention because I'm not surprised by this, but Pope is extremely left wing, like so many of our legislators. And I don't know if they forget what office they're running for, don't understand basic civics, or they just know what riles up their supporters. Maybe it's some combination of the three. But Harold Pope wrote this article in the Albuquerque Journal in which he essentially ranted about President Trump and the big beautiful bill and other various topics that he, you know, has a concern, has issues with the president. The article I posted at Heirs of Enchantment along with this post. From Ruidoso to Medicaid, NM must protect its values. And for 600 words, he goes on and on and on about all the terrible and horrible things about the big beautiful bill and President Trump. And I am not here to defend the big beautiful bill. I think it's better than the alternative. I am not here to defend every single policy President Trump has enacted along with Congress. What I am here to say is that Pope is running as a sitting legislator for another statewide office, lieutenant governor, and mentions absolutely nothing that either he or his party have done or plan to do to kind of highlight why people would want to vote for him or should keep him and his party in power. And I will say that this is by and large par for the course. And I would also say that the accomplishments are fairly skimpy if you look at any metrics that actually judge outcomes, not, oh, we created a new government program that spends this much money. That's a success. No, I'm talking actual achievements in improving New Mexicans' lives during, just say, oh, the time frame of MLG's term in office. It's a pretty paltry effort in terms of their improvements in the state of New Mexico, its economy, its education system, the rule of law, et cetera. So I'll hand it over to you with this, Wally. Uh, Pope's Freedom Index score was minus 163, which amazingly does not get him the very, very worst score in New Mexico's Senate, but he's definitely close to the bottom when it comes to even Democrats in New Mexico's legislature. So it's not a great track record there from one Harold Pope, but not a surprise.
Well, you know, and it's interesting, Paul, as I was doing show prep this morning, I was like, Senator Pope is I have never come across him in legislation or during the process of any of the things that I followed over the legislature. That does not mean that he wasn't up there pushing wonderful legislation, but you know, to the point, if you've ever seen the movie Miscongeniality, when Sandra Bullock's character was an FBI agent pretending to be a beauty pageant. And she gives this elaborate discussion of world
I
policy.
got to jump in and say we've had 700 plus episodes, and this is the first miscongeniality or Sandra Bullock reference. So kudos on that.
All right. But in that, she was getting nowhere with this kind of big policy. But then she said world peace. And everyone claps because that's what they expect that's what they expect a beauty pageant person to talk about from a policy point of view. Well, it's the same thing on the progressive side. If you don't have anything to offer, policy wise, or you really don't want to talk about the record of the 4 years before Trump came in or what's going on in New Mexico, just say, just gripe about Trump. You know, it's like people will clap in a certain segment. And will it be enough to get you elected as lieutenant governor? We'll have to wait and see. I think he's probably a bit of a long shot, but you know, you never know in this what's going on. The other thing in New Mexico is the party's gubernatorial candidate doesn't get to pick their running mate in New Mexico. It's not like president and vice president, where the president. So if you're running for governor, you get the lieutenant governor that is elected in the primary, whether you like them or not. And then the final thing I will say with, and it's one of those, I really don't want to say it, but I guess I will in the interests of honesty. The lieutenant governor is a position that really doesn't do a whole lot. You know, they do preside over the Senate during the legislative session, and I suppose you could do something there. But the key is that the role's not really, the role is not really one that's that
It's
powerful.
not worth a a pool of warm spit, I believe, to translate the vice presidential commentary.
Yeah,
That's
no, and
great,
exactly.
great quote about the vice
So
presidency.
the vice presidency is a position full of power and prestige compared to lieutenant governor of New Mexico. And not that we haven't had some good, bad, interesting, and indifferent ones over the years, but yeah, that's one of those. Once the primary happens, believe me, they won't be talking a lot about any lieutenant candidate governor candidate in the general election this fall.
All right, to fully flesh that quote out, that is from John Nance Garner, former vice president under FDR. I obviously he was replaced by Truman by the time action time, go time happened. So interestingly, uh, Garner, aka Cactus Jack, I like
Yes,
that. That's a good moniker.
yes, absolutely.
Cactus Jack said that the vice presidency is not worth a bucket of warm spit, and I would say that the vice presidency of the United States has proven time and time again to actually be worth a bucket of warm spit, starting with, not starting with, but certainly including Harry Truman and others who have taken over that office so far. And we'll knock on wood here in the studio. The uh, lieutenant governor position has indeed not been worth a bucket of warm spit for the simple reason that uh, in the last several years. By that I mean, starting with Gary Johnson in the modern world of New Mexico politics, when they changed the system for governor to 4 year terms, 8 years total before term limits, and then you have somebody new come in. So uh, Gary Johnson, Bill Richardson, Susana Martinez, Michelle Lujan Grisham, totaling over that time frame of 32 years. No lieutenant governor has truly assumed the realm of a helm of office as governor. We have not had a governor bow out or be assassinated, thank heavens. So,
Yeah, and then the way our constitution's written, when the governor's out of the state, lieutenant governor is in charge. And I hearken back to the Roberto Mondragon when he was lieutenant governor and Bruce King left the state. And he did a few pardons without the governor's permission, but he was, in fact, governor at that time under our constitution. So be nice to those lieutenant governors those of you out there committing crimes and misdemeanors, maybe you could get something pardoned by the lieutenant governor if you're good buddies with them.
Yeah, we can question the legitimacy and whether that's a good idea for lieutenant governors of either party to do that kind of thing. Of course, we've got a little auto pen scandal going on in Washington D.C. too, as well. So, uh, open questions there. But yeah, we haven't had a lieutenant governor. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be aware and understand what your party has done successfully, unsuccessfully, or what you're planning to do as the prospective lieutenant governor. Now, just to be clear, there are other candidates on the Democratic side. I know Stephanie Garcia Richard, the land commissioner, very impactful role, pretty high profile, and she's definitely tried to make it even more so. And then another candidate on the Democratic side. I don't know of any Republicans running currently for lieutenant governor, but uh, we're still very, very early in the process. All right. Moving onward here. Sadly, another report on education has come out. This one is from Wallethub, and it's surprising to absolutely nobody that New Mexico comes in dead last. The only question is, are we dead last among the states? Are we dead last with the inclusion of Washington, D.C.? Or are we dead last in some other combination all the way up to Barack Obama's 57 states that he so famously cited? The answer is we are 51st out of 51 jurisdictions studied. That includes Washington, D.C. The Wallethub report, I'll give the top lines, and you don't have to go very far into the methodology when you see the graphics that they produced. Dropout rate, New Mexico tied dead last with District of Columbia, Arizona, Alaska, and Idaho. Math test scores, dead last on our own. Reading test scores, on our own, we are dead last. Median SAT score, we are dead last as well. So when you're dead last in those four categories, it's hard to recover. I will only further add that Wallethub does provide one additional useful calculation, and that is how much is your state spending per pupil on education versus your student outcomes. And we are in the unenviable position of spending 29th most. So more than 21, 22 other jurisdictions, whereas our results are dead last. So, not good news, but very, very unsurprising news when it comes to New Mexico and its education system.
Yes, Paul, it is interesting. There are some interesting things in there. You mentioned DC, which has a lot of problems in a lot of ways, but on this particular one, they came in 24th compared to New Mexico being 51st, and I didn't dig into that. But the point of this is this is not getting to be a surprise for New Mexico, and as you say. If you have high dropout rate and you can't do math and you can't read, that's probably not going to be real good for
Yeah.
your education scores. And that's the situation, unfortunately, that we find ourselves here in New Mexico.
And that's kind of, I guess, ironically, you could say that that is the story of New Mexico politics writ large. A lot of states do things, some things worse than New Mexico does, but we do almost everything across the board so poorly as a state that we uh, have trouble performing at a high level in any of these outcomes based reports that compare the 50 states or some combination thereof against each other. We don't have strong economic policies. Our education system is abysmal, and we're not our crime is high. Just and the sad thing is that nothing is being done to really address the issue. And unfortunately, the fact is that very little will be reported in the media on this issue. You hear another report about New Mexico being dead last in education, and it elicits yawns of realization and understanding that, yep, we are again at the bottom of that list. And uh, unfortunately, voters haven't stood up and said, this is ridiculous. And we're just kind of, for the foreseeable future, going to be in this last place mode.
Yeah, Paul, and to your point is, a lot of times when things are going bad, there's some political hand wringing. Oh my goodness, this is bad. We're doing something about it. We need to get on it. It's pretty much crickets in New Mexico. Remain calm. All is well. No, nothing to see here. So, yeah, that may be acknowledging the problem and may be a good first step. But in a gubernatorial, election cycle, is that going to happen? I sort of doubt it.
Yeah. All right. Well, uh, sorry for the depressing news. Here's some good news. How's that? Uh, Starting with President Trump has canceled $4 billion in federal funding for California's high speed rail system. And this is great news. This is something that will save the taxpayers of all the states money, uh, possibly the most savings, actually, from the state of California. Although, if their political leadership, and you can never put anything quite past Gavin Newsom, but if they decide to either sue uh, and or somehow pay for this all themselves, this could increase the expenditures in the state of California. But from New Mexico to Virginia to Florida to Washington State, we will benefit from this $4 billion in unspent federal funding from the Federal Railroad Administration uh, being eliminated. So it is not that I am inherently against rail. I am of the opinion that in the United States, especially given where we've gone historically, that the broad outlines of the system that we have in place, where the freight railroads predominate uh, in the railroad sphere, that sector, whereas in some urban areas, you have mass transit and various other systems. Whether they work or not particularly well is an open question, certainly. And I'm going to, because of my recent travels, compare and contrast some of the other rail systems that carry passengers, like the New York subway, like the DC Metro. Philadelphia has a transit system versus, oh, just say the Rail Runner, which is a complete and total boondoggle. But uh, high speed rail sounds great, but very rarely is it going to make a lot of sense uh, when you have a robust and successful aviation system. Yes, there are issues there, starting with air traffic control. That needs to be reformed, and I've talked about that in the past. But uh, to connect in any substantive way the massive amount of significant sized cities that are far, far apart, it just doesn't really make sense for high speed rail in the United States at this point in time.
Yeah, and Paul, the California experiment, you might have been able to build part of that system to make it work, but as you get into major urban areas, which by the way, you probably ought to connect those, or what good is your train system after all? The land acquisition costs, the regulations that are brought on projects like that from the federal government, much less the California government is yeah, this project was dead, and unlike a lot of other projects that are invested in beyond the point at which sunk costs are regulated, the proverbial throwing good money after bad. Cooler heads prevailed on this one. Says, let's cut our losses. This thing is not going anywhere, and we don't need to put any money in it. And there are literally a host. Almost anything else that the government spends money on would be more productive than this rail project.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
that's a mighty low bar, by the way.
oh, I hear you. Now, a couple of additional things. While you can argue about Amtrak and the subsidies that are handed to Amtrak and whether those are useful or not, uh, it's not so easy to just take a high speed train and stick it on the Amtrak right away. You mentioned property acquisition. And that was one of the reasons, if you're going to do, just talk about theoretically, if you're going to do high speed rail in the state of California, you're going to do it along the coast. You're going to do it from San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, down into LA and San Diego. Obviously, that is a huge population dense area, but you're going to pay a lot of money and have to deal with a lot of eminent domain in order to acquire those tracks. And that's why, or build those tracks. And that's why they went the cheap route. And I believe it was Fresno to Barstow or something, or one of the inner, cities away from the coast. And that's cheaper. I get it, but you're not exactly solving any significant problems when it comes to traffic. Not that that necessarily would, but you're not even attempting to create a solution there. So you just can't also uh, have high speed rail going along the same tracks as regular trains because the turns are different and those kinds of things. And uh, the DC to Boston area has Amtrak's best shot, which is called Acela. It runs on the traditional tracks, and in some places it gets up to whopping 150, which is debatable whether it's high speed rail or not. But they also have to slow it down to the more traditional 80, 90 miles an hour because the uh, the tracks will only accommodate a certain amount of speed there. So it is a complicated issue that people don't always appreciate, but and we'll talk about all of this in a little detail in just a few minutes because of that lovely confluence of our family vacation. I call it on the ground research, but we'll debate that. Uh, Briefly, it is worth noting the passing of Ed Fuelner, who was uh, the president and founder of the Heritage Foundation. He founded that organization way back in 1973. I didn't know Ed Fuelner well, but definitely he is somebody who, uh, by creating the Heritage Foundation and making it the most powerful think tank, I would say, certainly in the United States, arguably the world, uh, they are not, I would say that Cato is more consistent as the guiding light of true libertarianism. They may not always be in line with all libertarians, but those are libertarians for you. The Heritage Foundation plays more of the inside game where they directly respond to the party in power and they attempt to mold their views to that, by and large, Republican organization. They do a great job. They're not, you know, they're not in the same boat now as they were during, for example, the George W. Bush administration. Uh, so they play a little more of a loose approach to these are our hardcore views. But that is a strategy. It is a realistic strategy in their organization working to influence and mold policies coming out of Washington, D.C., and that includes certainly Republicans, anybody in Congress as well. They are trying to engage and successfully move the needle into some form of conservative approaches to public policy. Any thoughts, Wally?
Well, yeah, and I will second your approach that the heritage is they're very pragmatic. They deal with the issues as they come up in Washington, by year, month by month, week by week, and day by day. And they uh, they could be criticized by more purists as like, oh well, you're trying to compromise on this issue, and it's not pure when it comes to whatever, whether it be conservatism, some sort of libertarianism or whatever. But yes, they deal with the issues as they come forward, and have done some very excellent work over the years. And it would be interesting, that's I could only happen as a thought experiment, but I wonder what the state of politics in the United States would be if they hadn't been around for the last 37 years. I have a feeling quite a bit different than it is even today.
No doubt. And when I was in Washington working at the National Taxpayers Union, we certainly worked closely with the Heritage Foundation, and they continue to be a very impactful organization in that milieu, we'll say. Uh, Now, moving on to uh, our trip and highlighting that a little bit. Uh, the Southwest flight to, and we're Southwest loyalists at the Guessing household. We're definitely frustrated by their business decisions they've been making recently on free baggage and assigned seating, but we were able to fly perhaps the last time as a family in the Wild West days of Southwest with no assigned seats and no uh, limitations on our baggage, just the two per customer free. Um, so we flew out on July 4th, Independence Day, and made our way to Baltimore, which is where Southwest's direct flight goes to, and eventually made our way to Arlington, Virginia, where we were going to kind of have our uh, station there, where we were going to be accommodated in the DC area. Went to the very first thing, of course, July 4th, the fireworks display. And if you're ever in or have the opportunity to be in DC or around DC for the fireworks on July 4th, I cannot recommend enough going to Arlington by the Iwo Jima Memorial near Arlington Cemetery and standing and watching where all of the monuments in the Capitol building are lined up. I'm talking Lincoln, Washington, and the Capitol, and watching the fireworks from there. It is a great perspective, a great view. The fireworks display was unparalleled, and a great time was had by all. Moving a little more quickly, Mount Vernon, George Washington's home, fantastic. Definitely a must visit if you're in that area. George Washington was no dummy. He knew exactly what he was looking for in terms of a beautiful, beautiful view. The previous day, so this was the day after, but referring to July 4th, Arnold Schwarzenegger had been there at the grave of George Washington and was doing an immigration ceremony, but put a wreath there at the grave. America's first action hero, Love Arnold, which was very, very cool. Got to take a picture of that. Hopefully, Heirs of Enchantment, I'll be able to get some pictures up. But, George Washington from Arnold Schwarzenegger, America's first action hero. That was pretty cool. Moving on, DC area, the Udvar Hazy Air and Space Museum. That's the one out by Dulles. It's a part of the Smithsonian. They've got Space Shuttle Discovery, which is by and of itself cool. A Concorde. They've got the Enola Gay. That's the plane that dropped the uh, first atomic bomb on Japan. They have I believe it's the original Burt Rutan Virgin Galactic spacecraft way back when, which is neat to see. Again, cannot recommend that enough. Went to the U.S. Capitol. The Visitors Center is fantastic. The tour is great. A little disappointed. I think New Mexico needs new. They have two statues from every state. Ours in New Mexico are Pope and Dennis Chavez. Let's just say I think we could do better. Uh, American History Museum. They have a suit from Breaking Bad. Wally, you can see the Walter White hazmat suit, so everybody gets a good taste of what New Mexico is all about. Uh, Went to the Natural History Museum as well, the Hope Diamond. Another of my favorite places in Washington, D.C. is the National Cathedral. That's where they have many of the presidents' uh, uh, funerals. It's an incredible building. It's also the home of Woodrow Wilson, one of my least favorite and I believe worst presidents of the United States, but also Helen Keller and Annie Sullivan are buried there. It's a fantastic building, Gothic architecture, really, really neat. Highly recommend that. Other than that, some beach time, then went to Philadelphia, and of course, checked out Independence Hall. One of the coolest things about Independence Hall, of course, where the Declaration was debated and ultimately agreed to, and then the Constitution was agreed to. But there is the chair that spurred Franklin's famous quote that Washington sat in during the, I believe, the Constitutional Convention. I could be wrong about that, but it had a sun portrayed in the wood, and Franklin was famous for allegedly quipping, I've been wondering if this was a rising sun or a setting sun. I now believe it to be a rising sun. And that original chair sits in the room, and you can go and see it for yourself. Got a chance to check out a beautiful cathedral of St. Peter and Paul in Philadelphia, the Betsy Ross House as well. Neat stuff to see in Philadelphia. The Constitution Museum. So really, Philly, we didn't spend as much time there, but it's definitely a city worth checking out. Went by the Rocky Steps, the Arts Museum. Also went up to the area where Washington on Christmas Eve crossed over the Delaware River to attack and ultimately succeed in one of the biggest important battles to put the Americans kind of on the map as actually potentially they might win. So that's the one, Washington crossing the Delaware, where it's rivers frozen, etc. So we went to that particular site. Went to New York City. Cannot say enough about the World Trade Center 9/11 Museum, as well as the Freedom Tower, which we went up as well. Of course, checked out the Statue of Liberty and many other aspects of New York City as well. I will say, as a downer, kids did not like New York City. Way too crowded. I think, wide open spaces in New Mexico. They're used to that. May not be used to the hustle and bustle of New York City. And also, Times Square smells entirely of marijuana, which is kind of unfortunate. Did a pedicab tour of Central Park. Central Park's, of course, a treasure of New York City. And just generally had a fantastic time over there in New York City. Now we get to the mass transit. So you can find this information out on uh, Wikipedia. They have fare box recovery ratios. Basically, this is excluding construction cost. What percentage of operations are paid for by the people who ride the actual transit system? Now, the top one, according to this report, is, and they don't break out New York completely. Here we are. Yes. MTA, that is the one that runs the subway. And that is a complicated but very robust subway system. 24.44%. That is nuts. So less than 25% of the costs, according to this, of New York subway system are borne by the people who actually ride the system. Washington, D.C. Metro, very similar rate, 24.3%. But if you're familiar with transit systems and you find yourself in New York, it is very useful. It takes a while to figure out because it's very complicated. The DC Metro is quite simple, but New York would be a complete disaster without some form of the subway system, which really does feed into the very congested and more urban areas of New York City. The DC Metro does a lot more outside of the big metro area. So anyway, more potentially to follow on that, but I wanted to give that brief retrospective on our 2-week trip to the DC, New York, and Philly areas. So we are going to conclude there for time interests. Thanks to you for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.